we are at Kensington, Minnesota. The marker that you see here is the spot where Olaf found the Kensington Runestone snuggled under the roots of a great tree. This being that location, the very spot, I hope that many of you will have an opportunity to visit in this particular area. This stone that has been a very controversial stone, and yet to this person, a fascinating work of art. One of the neatest stones done by laypersons, if you call a priest a layperson, that I have noted anywhere in the Americas. And I want you to note, when you see the actual stone, this will not be a copy, but you will be seeing the original stone that was found on this very spot. Yep, here we are, 1362, and beloved, you are there. All right, here we are in Alexandria, Minnesota. What an interesting runestone they have here. What a precious museum. A museum not built by commercialism, but a museum built from the heart of the community. That always impresses me. And probably one of the most interesting stones in America as far as being preserved and the message that it bears. I want to introduce you to someone that's been very helpful in arranging this in this area whereby we could come here and do this documentary. And I'm just going to let her say a few words about the area, the museum, and introduce two people that will be assisting us in this documentary. Louise Bachman, it's real good to have you with us, and thank you so much for helping us get this arranged.
Thank you, Arnold, so much for considering us and coming to Minnesota, and I'm hoping you enjoy your stay.
Oh, we will, I'm sure.
Okay. And good day, and welcome you to the Kensington Runestone Museum here in Alexandria, Minnesota. The runestone is a very special part of our museum, a museum that was built in 1953. The museum is totally funded by private donations and volunteer help. We would like to have you come visit the museum when you're in the area. We are open every day, including weekends from Memorial Day through Labor Day. And now I would like to introduce you to two very special people, Mr. Marv Martinson, the president of the museum board, and Margaret Leitner, the consultant for the Kensington Runestone Museum. Thank you.
The rune alphabet is an alphabet that was used by, I'm going to say, Nordic priests. The particular priest that used the rune alphabet in Vinland was a Christian priest. Christian? Why? Well, there's a little bit of Latin that has worked in, definitely documenting the fact that he is Christian, and that is well and good. It gives us the fact that in 1362, that Nordic peoples traveled from Iceland on around down into the Americas, that is to say Canada, around the lakes, and even in our modern day Minnesota. What does that mean? That means that our Father's Word is very accurate, inasmuch as scattering to even the new land those lost sheep of the house of Israel. God has never lost anyone. That is to say, as to their whereabouts. Only man has lost himself. Margaret has written this book, and we're going to have it available here. And those of you that want to get a little more familiar with the rune alphabet, I would recommend it, because it, for a lay person, it is understandable, it's good reading, and I think you'll enjoy it. And it is based on the Kensington Runestone. We have found in doing this documentary and researching that, as always, it would seem that the academic world has brought grief to another family. And I hope that certainly the people in and around the area of Alexandria in Minnesota can gain a great deal from this documentary on their own precious neighborhood in the area of Kensington, Alexander, and that particular county in Minnesota. May we put to rest some of the, I don't want to use the word gossip, but what else do you call the smudge that the world, the academic world has placed upon a family and upon your area. I think following this documentary, you're going to be well pleased and take a great deal more pride in this great work that has been found in your area. It's very meaningful, very, very meaningful. Columbus did not discover this great land, the Americas. There were Nordic peoples and other peoples long before Columbus touched the shores of this land. So let us meet Margaret, a very dedicated, sincere person. I think you'll gain by her research into this great Kensington Runestone.
Our story begins in Bergen, where the Nar, which was the ship, the royal ship of King Magnus, set out to go to Iceland, and then on its regular journey to the eastern and western settlements of Greenland. These, of course, were settled first by Eric the Red, Leif Erikson's father. Both of the settlements are, despite the name, are on the western side of Greenland. About 1341, Ivar Bardson was sent up to investigate the western settlement because there were reports that Skrælings, the enemy, had invaded that western settlement. What became of those people? Well, the report was that they had come to America to join what they believed were the Skrælings. The story, of course, is incorrect. The Skrælings were the enemy. They had come to join their own people who were settled here in Vinland. And remember, Vinland extended from Cape Cod all the way across to Minnesota and the V of Lake Superior. The Nor, no doubt, searched all of this area for the people. They had set out in 1354, and the date that we have on the stone over here in Minnesota is 1362, 8 years later. They looked and searched for those people, and they found them, according to the stone, the vestry, all living over here in the middle of Minnesota in God's great country. And they appreciated it because it looked so very much like Norway and Sweden. The translation of the stone is 8 Goths and 22 Normen on a discovery journey from Vinland, round about the west. We had camp with 2 skerries. Skerries being rocky islands, a 1 day's journey north from this stone. We were out and fished. After we came home, we found 10 men, red with blood and dead. And then he begins the prayer, Ave Virgo Maria, and ends it as the people did, save us from evil. On the side of the stone, we have har, which is have 10 men looking after our ships at sea. These words right here are after our ship. 14 days journey from this island, year 1362. Now that's the translation that has been accepted for 90 years since we have found the stone. My research clears up some problems by extending that translation in a multiple translation. And the clue that I have is over here in this rune, which is a large oval rune. And in it is a cross, and it's a slanted cross, so that we have O-E-N or E-N or N-E-O, any number of translations. And for me, it reads in here, E-N, in God are Knutson. And here's a double translation, K-O-O-T, Knut. And, here's and, 8 Swedes and 22 Norsemen. He is telling us that these people are dead. They are in God. This was the normal way that people spoke of people who had died and were good Christians and presumably then were in the graces of God with him in heaven. So we have in God, Paul Knutson, 8 Swedes and 20 Norsemen. We indeed do have a complete sentence. All the critics are to be corrected. This sentence then reads very well and really conveys to us the fact that this is a death memorial. Okay. This Vinland here peculiarly can be read both from left to right and right to left. And here Ivar introduces the beginnings of the puzzles and the codes that are on the stone. He couldn't possibly tell us the whole story. This is a death memorial. It's not fitting in the plain text to tell us anything about the expedition or the circumstances or his own life or any of these things. Instead, he puts in here a series of codes and ciphers to give us all this information, but we have to learn to read it. And we begin to read it in this third line. When Leif found America and named it Hulaland, Markland, and Vinland, he used the letters A, B, and C, and they are in the saga. Vinland was C, Hulaland was A, and Markland was B. Look how careful Ivar is. The third line we have Vinland. He isn't going to confuse anybody who knows the sagas. He follows the saga. So we have Vinland of Vest. And then we have the additional V here, which we begins the next sentence. But anyone who knew runes and would begin to read this without knowing what was there would have read it Vestry, because that rune is unknown to many people and it imitates V, which the other rune, which is an M. Looks just like it, except it has a dot with it. What he was doing was making A, V, and M equivalent, the same rune. This line, 3, Vinland of the West, can be read Vinland of the Vestry. And the Vestry were people who were lost and had migrated to America, and Ivar and the expedition came to find. They were part of the Diocese of Gardar-Vinland. Gardar-Vinland as a diocese was established in 1121, much earlier, and even a bishop had been sent. Erik Knutson had been sent to America to establish that diocese. But here we have these people found, not lost, but found here in Minnesota, in the heart of America. Actually, the far reaches of Vinland. So, the stone substantially changes its story when we translate this properly, and these are the people These are the people of the West Settlement. These are the people of Vestry. When you come to see the Kensington Runestone in the museum here, you will be struck by the fact that you can almost read it. The AVM here is one of the first things that you will see. And that is not by accident, it's really by design. Do you notice that from here, the eye follows right down the fault to these letters, and it goes beyond them to the letters here. The last line is the last line in Swedish of the Lord's Prayer. And this word is evil. To the man who was doing this stone, evil was a presence. They called it the evil one. And he simply would not put evil on the stone unless he separated it from all else on the stone. He would not have anybody here who's mentioned on the stone influenced by the evil one. Now, that was the real beginning of my study of this stone. I could not imagine that anybody would put the word evil on the stone here, the last line. There are 3 more lines on this side. And the name of Mary here from the scriptures, and not put God's name there. I simply knew that that was wrong, that there was something more to be found. And of course there was. And I began by looking for some way that God's name was on the stone. And as soon as I looked, it was there. Here we have the numeral 8. Come down 8 lines until we get to Mary's name. Go over 8 runes and we get to G. It reads off, blood, og, dead, A-V-M. Right here in the middle, we read it backward and it spells G-O-D, God. At the top of the stone is the word got air, and right next to it is the word ok, okay. But if you read it, you can read got air rock. God is my rock. This, of course, is the scripture from David when David was penitent before the people and God and said, God is my rock. He was referring to the practice of the Philistines and other pagan religions who actually worshipped rocks. And so God was his rock. And God was the rock of the people here in America. This stone, then, was their Bible. They hadn't Bibles. They had nothing to refer to. And I've carved here the scriptures for them and reminded them of God. God and evil. God is my rock. The prayers that the people were used to say in the church back in Sandnes in Greenland. It was their practice to pray in congregation. And they would say the Hail Mary, Ave Virgo Maria, and then it would be answered by the people. And then the priest would begin the Lord's Prayer and the people would finish it. Save us from evil. And over they would pray that, because this was the prayer of the people. This is the most authentic part of the stone. It cannot be disputed. These are the prayers of the people, and they are authentically portrayed on this stone. This rune has not been recognized by the scholars. They call it an E within this oval, and it's not an E. The camera can easily tell you by focusing on it that it's not an E, it's a slanted N, and therefore it reads one, E-N, one God, one cross, one island. Ivor was telling us he knew this was not an island, he knew this was a continent, one island. It was a rallying cry for the Crusaders, and a very late crusade it was in 1362, who came here. They were out to rescue these people from paganism, and therefore it was a true crusade. It was even funded by the Pope Innocent VI from Peter's Pence. And their rallying cry was one God, one cross, one island. The word on this side, which is island or home. In the spring, after Olaf Oman had the stone delivered back to him from the experts in Minnesota and Chicago as what he termed a lying runestone, because they were saying that it was a hoax. Olaf Oman went out with his friends to look for treasure. Some of the neighbors were just eagerly waiting for the frost to come out of the ground so they could dig on the finding site and perhaps find some Indian treasure buried underneath the stone. So he went out with them, and they found nothing. They did find one small hone or whetstone, much used, and when Olaf Oman took it in his hand, it broke in two. It was so used and so worked upon that it was worth nothing. And he threw it back into the hole, not knowing that he had a link with his Christian friend, Ivor, and Ari and Harry, who had cut the runestone. And so that hone is in the ground somewhere, and near the place where the runestone itself was found. But Ivor, in a kind of a joking way, put it on the stone. From this island, yes, but from this hone, because that's what he had buried under the stone. Olaf Oman has been accused of fabricating this stone. No. Ivor put his name here. He was modest. This was a man who was of the people. He had been born in Greenland. He was a priest of the people. Ivor puts his own name here, but he does it modestly. He says we. And then he spells var rather strangely in order to put his name there. So it reads, the runes are here and say V, here's V-I, and then the next word V-A-R. You can see how easily Ivor is hidden here, I-V-A-R. Now the people reading this, for whom it was intended, had no problem with finding Ivor's name on there. They'd lived with him 8 years, from 1354. They had no problems. It wasn't hidden. They knew that Ivor, their priest, who had to go back to Norway, was leaving them the stone which symbolized religion, Christianity for them. And in order to do that, he gave them this stone in which all the echoes of Christianity are there. The scripture, God's name, evil, because that's part of life, and all the rest of it. On this stone are codes and ciphers which give the complete prayers, the Credo, the Our Father, the Hail Mary, and many other echoes of Christianity. The basic doctrines, here we have Mary, the Mother of God, Jesus is the Messiah. Right here, he spells backwards, D, or in front, D-A-V here, right here, David, whom Jesus was the house of David. He gives us up here Aaron, Moses' brother, who was the founder of the priestly line in the Jewish tradition. Over and over, he hides in here things that they will be able to find and that they will be able to ferret out. They will come day after day while this stands to find on here something more that they can recall. Remember, these people were not barbarians, they were Christians. They were faithful to their religion, they were faithful to God, but they had come to find a better life. That beautiful land of America and Minnesota.
As in most cases, when you analyze and truly give in-depth research to a particular individual and his writings, usually you can find one letter or one word that will declare and establish a case. The word I'm about to share with you, bino, is a word that will document the fact that the Kensington Runestone is not a fake, and may we once and for all time put to rest the rumors that have been brought forth. Let's go, if we may, to a blackboard here for a moment, and let's analyze this particular stone. It was found in the year 1890, so naturally whoever chiseled the message in a very beautiful way on the stone had to have all the information that we find on the stone at his disposal in 1890. But we have one word, and as always, if you search deep enough, you will find that one case, bino, which is the equivalent of the Icelandic thino. And it was used in 1362. That it would be the date that you have seen on the stone. Now, bino and its use in the dative function was indeed authentic. By that I mean on the stone it was used in the exact proper form, which is, it's archaic. It is ancient even to the 1300s to use this in the dative function. But do you know something? This was not known until the year 1904 that it was correct or was authentic. That bino, again the equivalent of the Icelandic thino, used 2 times on the Kensington stone. And I'll refresh your memory. This stone and this island. Now, when we see this, and when we know and when we understand that something that was scribed in 1890, and yet modern day scholars did not understand the proper use until 1904, the odds of it being a fake are off the chart. It could not be. Therefore, the Kensington Runestone is absolutely, beyond any shadow of a doubt, the work of a priest who was familiar with the rune alphabet. Therefore, be proud in Minnesota. Be proud in Kensington. Be proud in Alexander that you have a stone that is one of the most beautiful works that this scholar has observed in all the Americas. A fake? No way, my friend. And if a scholar takes just a little time and uses a little common sense rather than some bookworm attitude of some professor that has never been in a field or knows the working of the minds of a lay person, even a lay priest, that would put forth this message on this stone. There is no way on God's earth that this stone could be a fake. And I would have you, when you see Olaf's picture near the end of this documentary, I would say question him in your mind. Would you want to challenge the honesty of this man as he looks in your eye? Think about that, won't you? No way on God's earth that the Kensington Runestone could be a fake. It is very real. And the tragedy that took place here was very real also. To a scholar of God's Word, you can even sense the guilt that is written into this message that a group left 10 in camp while they were fishing. Our Father's Word is most precious, but the stones that speak around the nation are precious also. They're our heritage. Be real proud of your heritage. I want to take you this time inside the home, the actual farmhouse that Olaf and his family lived in. Let's see if we can get a little feel for what it was like in 1890 and in years past following that we know and can understand this family. A family that worked this land that you now observe. Let's go there now and let's observe the conditions and the place where Olaf and his family lived.
I've never been sitting in Olaf Ullman's kitchen, but I've been in here quite a few times when Arthur, his son, lived here. He was the last of Olaf Ullman's 9 children to stay and to live on the farm. And shortly after that, the farm was bought by a public subscription and a grant from the state legislature, and now Douglas County owns and administrates the park. This house probably held a lot of grief, a lot of misunderstanding and resentment, and perhaps some anger over the way the American public was so prejudiced against the family, and especially the man Olaf who found this runestone. It's a poor farm. Mm-hmm. We've been up on the hill, it's three hills and a bog, a lake, an old lake. And this small house, I don't remember how many, it's got 4 rooms, it's got another bedroom upstairs, held that whole family. They went off to school, the one-room school up here, and Olaf was clearing his last field in 1898 in the fall when his son Edward came out to bring him lunch, just like most families do, bring the father a late lunch in the afternoon while he's finishing his field. Olaf had a winch in which he was pulling over poplin trees, asp they were called, and this was one of the last trees that he was pulling over to make another cornfield. He had only 2 cornfields as it was in this big farm. He had some cows, he had some pigs and chickens, and it was a rather poor farm for a family of 9. He had farmed the land for quite a few years. He had bought this farm, and it was the last farm around here with his wages that he had made in Brandon when after he had married and started to have children. He originally came from Sweden, had to pay off his passage money before he could actually begin to save for a farm. And Arthur once said to me, it only brought him sorrow. Sorrow isn't the kind of word most of us use, but it's the word he used. Olaf Ullman's family One of them, one of his sons committed suicide, and another of his daughters left the farm and was never heard from again because of the prejudice and whispering and talking about this family and what shall I call it?
Part of that, I suppose, was the ridicule of the community, because a lot of people don't think that the Kensington Runestone was real. He's even been accused that he carved some of this
Yes.
stuff, which we know, of course, isn't the case. But a lot of that was really some ridicule against
The
this
ridicule. He said that it's in the books, and that is true. Many, many people had made their fortunes on books written about this was supposed to be a hoax, and of course they could never prove that Olaf had anything to do with the stone. But you know, when university professors write a book, it's generally believed.
Sure. You mentioned about this winch that they were pulling over the aspen trees with, and they uncovered the stone. We should just mention that we have a model of that winch and that piece of equipment in our museum at the Runestone Museum in Alexandria. And it's really interesting to see how mechanically that really worked, to how they grubbed the land. Today, you know, we think of nothing to it to clear 40 acres. You just get a caterpillar and a dozer, but in those days, you had to pull each one out one at a time.
Hard work. It was very hard work to do.
I believe there was a witness actually there when Olaf was unearthing this runestone. Can you remember or give me any information about that?
Yes, that would be west of Olaf's farm was Niels Fatten's farm down across the bog. And he had come out to work on his field at the same time that Olaf did that afternoon. So when they had exchanged some pleasantries, and then they both went about their business, Olaf pulling over trees and his working on his land. And when they found that the tree that he pulled over had in its grip, in the grip of its roots, this big stone, Edward went to look at it and found that there was an inscription on it. And then at that point, Olaf called to Niels to come over and see what they had found. So he was actually an eyewitness to the finding of the runestone. Now, he made affidavits, and his finding the stone and his being the actual witness, but they were very much discounted by most of the authorities, and even he was suspected of perhaps being in a hoax. Yes, even being in the hoax.
Well, we know that the runestone is real.
Yes, we do.
Margaret, how many years have you been researching the stone?
I started to work on the Kensington Runestone in about 1958, but I really didn't get started until after 1962, and then I really began to do the research that it requires. And that was a lot of learning about runestones, because there are only a few books in English that you can find that will tell you anything about runes. So every runestone that I could find in a book or any record of it, I would get the picture, whatever I could, and begin to decipher it myself. Mm-hmm. And that's how I learned about runes and runestones. I do have a background, which was very fortunate. I have a background in history and English, so that, and I am a librarian, so I had no problems with research.
There are some other stones with runes on too, and we have, you're researching some of those, and we'll be adding that to the display down at the runestone.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit maybe about additional stones that back up?
Okay. The fact that we have other rune stones in the area, and Minnesota has quite a few of them. There's one down called the Starbuck Stone, which is down in the Glenwood Museum. We have ourselves just acquired the Chukaya Altar Stone, which is a stone about about like this. It's about that size, and it's broken in half. We believe that it was brought in by the people who did the Kensington Runestone in 1362. We believe that these people were both military and clergy, sent by the Pope and the King Magnus of Norway and Sweden in about 1354. We have a copy of the commission hanging on the wall in the museum in Danish, and it's a copy of the commission that Paul Knudsen received from the king to come here and preserve Christianity. Now that sounds as if, what has Christianity and Greenland to do with the middle of America? Our country that we're sitting in right now in Minnesota was part of Vinland, and Vinland was also part of Greenland's diocese. That is that Greenland's people had migrated over here to Vinland, Minnesota, and therefore the church had to provide for them. And they sent this expedition to find out what had happened to the Christian people. Because in 1341, half of the people of Greenland migrated, and they did not know what had happened to them. We know now that they migrated here, right where we are, to Kensington, and had joined other Christian people and pagan Norse people who lived here. I honestly believe that Leif Erikson also visited here. This is Vinland, part of it, not all. Vinland stretched from our latitude here in Minnesota to probably Cape Cod, and I believe that these people knew the Great Lakes very well. It was their inland sea. Over here in the meadow that Ivar talks about are where the people of the 1341 colony settled. You have to, when you picture it here, the Indians up here on their hill, the Crusaders over on the other hill, Swedes took the pagan hill up there because they were nobility. And down here in the meadow were the people who had lately come. And of course they weren't integrated, with the people who'd lived here a long, long time. Many of those people were intermarried with the Norse, the Indians, and so on. And so when I come here, I see those people.
Yes.
I see them. I see their sod and rock huts over there, and some of them who have adopted the Indian teepee. And the Indians who lived here and then moved on up north to fish. And, that was the tragedy, that these people were massacred probably about 75 miles north of here at Cormant Lake, near Detroit Lakes. And the Indians and Norse people intermarried, moved on into the plains, up to Mandan and Bismarck. And we have proof. I have been at Fort Ransom and looked at their death stones, similar to the ones we have out here in the woods. Stones that they drilled for their hole to put for their boat, but also runes on them to memorialize their people who died.
Wow.
In runes. That's their language. It's strange to us. We say, how can that be language? Well, there are millions of languages, all kinds of languages, and this is theirs.
She mentioned studying the stones since 1962. That's the year we moved to Alexandria. We came there in 62. It seems like a lifetime that I've been there. And you take 62 from 90, and that's 28 years Margaret's been doing research and studying about this stone, about the runestone. And in our community, we appreciate Margaret and all the efforts that she's done to study and to prove the story of the Kensington Runestone and to continue to make it known. And hopefully that with this documentary that we're able to share with you, that you again too will be able to expand upon to the people of the world a little bit of history.
It is certainly we that are appreciative, and we know how deep and how difficult and how hard research can be, and we love you for having done that, for your sharing it with us.
Big story, that has to be told. As you said, you quote scripture there and say, the stones will speak, and now's the time. They are beginning to speak. The history of, or prehistory of America is going to be pretty astounding to people when they find out really all of it. My new book will have much more disclosures than the other one, the first one, Crusade. And I have a Christian art and culture major, you see, from St. Catherine's College in St. Paul. And you see, so I was simply set up for the Runestone. I don't know what you want to say. The Lord really set me up. Here it is, And the period, I specialized in the period. I did my papers on Richard III, and Philip, which is 1350s, in just the right period. So I hadn't any problems in researching it at all. I really didn't need to in many things. Just that I didn't know much about Swedes and Norwegians.
You're looking at a Norwegian.
He's a Norwegian.
Yeah,
I didn't know much about Swedes and Norwegians. My husband's former housekeeper was Nettie Benson, and she lived in the next farm just down the road here. And she grew up with the Omans. So I had an eyewitness again of people, who knew the Omans, and really, there was no way that they weren't that kind of people.
In his latter years, just before his death, let's say, before he passed on, did he receive any joy at all, do you think, from the stone? Any appreciation?
The one picture that we have in the museum is the picture of him at this picnic. Yes, I think so. I think he was really honored at that picnic. Nettie went to the picnic. I remember she told us about that. And we know some other friends, Henry Moen and some of these other people, did go to that picnic. And I do believe, yes, I do think that he perhaps felt some acclaim there,
Well, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I really think he did. That one picture that we have, it's in the museum.
Sitting here in this farmer's kitchen, I feel very moved when I look behind me and I see a pitcher pump. To us that's old-fashioned, but to a woman and a man with 9 children, that was convenience. You didn't have to go out and draw the water by rope out of the well. But at the same time, this humble kitchen with furniture that I have seen all my life from the American farm community, and the statements I'm about to make are my own statements and bear no reflection whatsoever on this museum, but I cannot help but to say a word to the academic world. The academic world that is so quick to judge if it does not clearly understand something that a set of credentials could be online. To have love in your heart and feeling and understanding that when you are in the home of a genuine American family, a man that had to work a considerable length of time just to pay his passage to this nation, grubbing in the rocks and the trees and the stones to feed a family of 9 children, and then to have the academic world make a judgment because one day this farmer, a very wise farmer indeed, very intelligent, anyone that can design a winch with the material that he had to work with was very intelligent, but at the same time it shows his mind was not to forgery but to supporting his family. And I don't see anything super fancy in this kitchen that would indicate that he had ever connived to get rich, but just to be comfortable and to feed his family. So I want to make a plea and ask the academic world. Have a little heart, my friend. If your credentials are that shaky to you, back off, make no comment. But don't, in your wisdom supposedly, make a judgment against a man that loves his family enough he's willing to break his back working the ground. For beyond any shadow of a doubt, the misery, the ridicule, the prejudice that was brought on the family that called this home, and I can still feel the warmth that was within that family. Anyone that would bring that ridicule, and now we have found that one of the letters on that stone was not even understood by the so-called experts until the year 1907. Then it becomes impossible for the Kensington stone to have been a fake when the academic world itself did not understand that particular letter until 1907. So I would say shame that all that misery was brought upon a man and his family, even causing one son to commit suicide. And you that have made documentaries with me throughout this nation know this is not the first suicide. Remember Newark? I think it's time that we take a deep breath and realize there are things we can discuss in this great nation. And one of the reasons we got to be so great is that we do have love and compassion. I wonder how long it's been since the academic world added a great deal to that love and compassion. Think about it, won't you? Before you make a decision of slander or fraud next time, you going to do your homework first, friend? Or if you're standing on shaky ground, is it just an easy out? Why don't you be a man or a woman and make sure first that the love and understanding that could have been in this simple kitchen, this table, how many meals were eaten here? If it could speak, thousands. Thousands of meals taken from this table that were grown in the very soil that those backs creamed and pulled at to remove the trees to put food on this table. Think about it. Pour some love into America of understanding. And don't be afraid to talk. Your credentials, after all, are really not that important, are they? If you can't help pour love into America and understanding. Is it so easy to call anyone that might think different than you a crackpot just because they have a love and a hunger for the truth of the events that are marked into the soil of this great nation? I think not. Think about it. Hey, you're very necessary. We appreciate you. But I hope that never again in a documentary do I find heartache like the academic world has poured out on the simple in rural America.
You know, the appearance of a man says a great deal if you are a discerner of personalities. As you're observing the face of Olaf, with one hand resting upon this Kensington runestone, I would say question him, question the face. Is he an honest man? And let me ask you something. How would you like to be standing before him as he lived and call him a fake? To call this stone a fake? I don't think anyone would truly have the nerve. I think we can see the firmness in his gaze as he says to the world, I found this stone on the location that you observed at the beginning of this documentary. Would you question me